Well, g'day everyone, how's it going? Coming at you from the studio tonight, and I'm just wanting to do a quick video on my processing of CinemaDNG footage through Davinci Resolve. Now, I use Davinci Resolve to do the processing and some color grading as well, but I don't actually like it as an editing suite yet. I feel like it's still got some room to go. A lot of people are adopting it, and certainly it'd be nice to not have to pay Adobe for their CC package. But just at the moment, I still run my commercial editing workflow through Premiere Pro. So that means when I shoot on something like a Blackmagic URSA, or if I was to shoot something or have footage I'm editing from Magic Lantern camera, like 5D Mark III maybe, then this is the workflow that I've adopted for that. So I just want to show you how I do it, make sure that it all works, and yeah, it gives me proxies that I can then use to edit in Premiere Pro. So jump on over the screen with me here and I'll fire up Davinci Resolve. I'm using Resolve Studio. I'm not using the free version. The free version has some limitations. I think you can only export in 1920 by 1080 full HD. You can't export in 4K, which I'm going to be doing. But you can still set up your timeline in 4K, and then it'll just render the exports at 1920 by 1080. So here, basically, this is just the Davinci Resolve 16 splash screen, and I'm just going to go New Project, and I'm going to call this new project Lisbon 31, and it's Upper Springfield, and I'm going to call it number 2 because I already created one earlier for some other files that I was just working with. So it jumps me up and always kind of enters me into this screen. I'm not sure why. Might be a default setting. Anyway, this is the edit screen. So straight away, I want to jump across here to the import screen, or media, I guess it is, media screen. And I want to chase up files. Now, a little bit of background on this project. I shot this for a client of mine, and it's a home walkthrough or home feature film, we call it. It's not like a real estate film. It's a builder of homes who have display homes that we go and shoot for them, high quality and high end videos. So this was shot on a Blackmagic URSA Mini 4K, and I shot it all in 50 frames per second. And the reason I shot it on the Blackmagic URSA is because I wanted the raw footage. I wanted footage that I could then use to really grade and get those high dynamic range scenes looking really good, and clean up any noise in the shadows using the raw images. So we shot it at 50 frames per second every single clip. And then what we're wanting to do is conform that down to a 25 frames per second timeline so that all the footage plays back at half the speed. So I want to make sure my proxies that I'm setting up are actually already interpreted through Davinci Resolve. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull in all the files now into the media pool and show you that. And then we go through right the way through to exporting them out of Resolve as proxies. So basically now I want to set up my project in a way that makes sure that everything I'm doing is already preset before I go. So here, the footage on the Blackmagic URSA is quite a different. The 4K is 4000 by 2160. So I can go and check what Davinci has for me here. But interestingly, they make the Blackmagic URSA Mini, but they don't have it in Davinci Resolve as an option here. So you've got 4096 by 1716, 4096 by 2160. You've got 4096 by 3112 full aperture. You've also got a close one is 3996 by 2160 DCI flat 1.85. But none of those are what we need for the URSA, so I'm just going to put in here. And this is probably not relevant to you if you're coming from Magic Lantern, or you're wanting to process CinemaDNGs from another Blackmagic camera that's a different size. But anyway, I know that my size is 4000 by 2160 square. Now, this is a really important step. Although I've shot this in 50 frames per second, I'm coming here now and I'm changing this to 25. So my timeline is going to play back at 25 frames per second. And I need to match that as well at 25 frames per second for my project playback frame rate. So both those need to match. Now, I've done it before where they haven't matched, and the timeline still runs fine in Davinci Resolve, but I've ran into problems where the footage just is not readable in Premiere. It's not readable in QuickTime either. So this is a really important step here to have both of these set up at 25. The video monitoring can stay the same because I'm not really worried about video monitoring. I'm not monitoring out of Davinci Resolve or anything like that. The camera metadata can also, optimized media for render cache can also stay as is because I'm not really rendering out anything to watch playback. I wanted just to render it out to these proxies that I'm going to create. So all of that can stay as is. The image scaling, I want it to scale smoother. I don't want it to be too sharp or anything like that. So all of that can stay the same. Scale entire image to fit is the mismatched resolution files, but there aren't any mismatched resolution. They're all shot in 4K, so that's fine. Match timeline settings, I want that on my output scaling so that it basically scales the output to the same as my timeline. So I know that's 4000 by 2160, so that's all good. Color management is really important here because we're bringing in DNG images, and then Resolve is interpreting what they are and what color it should give to those images. So here, the simple setting I use is Davinci Resolve Y RGB. Now, I don't have a color managed sort of setup or ACES, workflow. So I know my monitors are calibrated, but as opposed to like a proper commercial workflow, I don't have. So I know I'm just going to go Davinci YRGB, which is fine. And I want my timeline color space to be Rec 709 Gamma 2.4. And basically, as soon as I tell Davinci that what I'm bringing in, it will then give me a Rec 709 image. So it's already going to put a bit of a base grade on my images and everything like that. So it won't be a super flat profile. So lots of information here, guys, but I just want to take you through every single step in this process. So basically now that's all set up, ready to go. And I'm not going to apply any LUT or any look to the footage because I just want it in Premiere as like a nice Rec 709, kind of a little bit contrasty, but still needing some saturation and needing some tweaks so I can do my final color grade later on once I see the clips all matched clip to clip in the timeline. The rest of it stays the same in this color management tab. Now the general options also, I think there's going to stay the same for this project. This is just talking about conforming, how the footage will conform and how you're embedding things into the clips and stuff like that. But for the process of what I'm doing, I don't need any of this information as well. Some of the data will carry across to the proxies, but it's not critical for my workflow. Now, this is a really critical point, camera raw. Now, this is how Davinci Resolve interprets the images that I'm bringing into Resolve. And I'm not ARRILX, I'm not Blackmagic Raw, which you would have if you were running now the BMCC 4K, but I'm actually CinemaDNG. That's my go-to there. So full res I want the camera metadata to run how it interprets the camera, because I feel like I shot it pretty well. I shot it all at the correct Kelvin for the shoot and for the look of the houses, and I also shot it in 800 ISO, which is probably there were some comments about shooting in 400 because it's cleaner, but then 800 expands the dynamic range of the URSA Mini. So I shot it all in 800, and I know that I'll have some noise in some of the more contrasty scenes or more dynamic range scenes that I'll have to correct and clean up later. But I'm ready to go with neat video, and Davinci Resolve Studio has great noise reduction process as well. So I'm all good in the color grade to kind of fix some of those problems that shooting with 800 ISO might have brought into my footage. So the camera metadata is what I'm going to run with here to interpret the footage. If you didn't select that, if you selected project or CinemaDNG default, then it would be different. You can also then, once you go project, you can set all these settings in the project to interpret the footage. So that means you can change your white balance, you can change your, put some saturation on the footage, you can do a basic grade on the footage as it is already in Davinci Resolve. But because I'm coming back into Resolve later, after this workflow, after I've gone into Premiere, cut the edit, then I'll XML that back into Davinci Resolve, and I'll do all this color grading later. Anyway, so all good. So I think that's correct for that. Capture playback is fine because I'm not worried about that. The rest is all good. So I'm good to go and save that. And then it says, are you sure you want to change the project frame rate? I'm sure, so I'm going to change it. Now, I'm at the point where I can ingest this footage. If I had ingested it before and then gone back, it would have blocked out a few things and not let me change those things. So this is that's the first step you need, is to make sure that you do that project step first. And so now all the footage is going to be kind of interpreted as a bit of a basic grade. It's going to have a basic look to it. And I'm liking what I'm seeing here. Not too bad. So far, it looks fine. So that's the base grade. So anyway, now I'm going to select all this footage. So I'm just going to select the top one, choose Shift and select the bottom one, and drag and drop that into my project. Now it's still asking me this question. The clips have a different frame rate than the current project settings. Do you want to change? And I want to say don't change at this point, because I want to do this step myself basically. So now what I'm going to do, all the clips are now in this project, and I'm going to go and grab them all. And what I want to do is I want to go to clip attributes, choose clip attributes, and I'm going to go to 25. So this is like interpreting footage, same as what you would do in Premiere. So I want to interpret all as 25 so that it plays back at half the speed. Audio, I'm going to actually turn off I'm going to mute out the audio because that's just me talking, and if I missed a shot, I'm going, oh, I missed it. Or if I got a shot, I'm like, yeah, I got it. And that's all that is. And this is all good to stay as is as well. So now all that footage should show up in the frames per second line here as 25. Just going to scrub through, check that I've got all the footage. So that is basically my ingest step all done and dusted. So now I want to create a little mini timeline of all this footage. So it's already all selected, but just to make sure, I'm just going to select one clip in Command A to select all the clips. And I'm going to drag this into a timeline here and create a timeline of all that footage. So there's all my footage in a timeline ready to go. It's all conformed down to 25 frames per second, and if you watch it, it will, if we can watch it, we may not be able to watch it in real time. It will be playing back at half the speed. So I'm going to go O for out point and make sure my in point is at the start. Now I'm ready to add this timeline to the render queue and render out these clips. So I'm going to head over to the Deliver tab, and basically now on the Deliver tab, I'm going to go over here and set up my Proxy Renders to render these clips out. So basically here, I'm going to go to my video, and I want a QuickTime, but I do not want H.264. Premiere has a real problem with kind of running smoothly with H.264 footage, so I want to make sure that this is a Apple ProRes. And I'm going to render out a 422 proxy file because 422 and ProRes are really nice files, play really well in Premiere on Apple computers. I'm running on a 2015 MacBook Pro full spec, so this runs pretty well on my system. And also, basically, there you running the proxy means that it's the smallest Apple ProRes piece of footage that you can produce, and it still gives you some element of being able to see the footage in when you're in Premiere, see and look at the footage and go, apply a basic grade on it and see what you've got in terms of exposure and stuff like that. It gives you enough room to be able to make a determination of whether that clip is going to work in the timeline or not. Sometimes I've got to jump back to Davinci Resolve to kind of push it and see the grade on the actual DNG images, on the images, the raw images. But generally, I can get a feel for it in Premiere just with a proxy piece of footage, so it's all good. Now I want to make sure that the resolution is custom again, and the frame rate is 25. That's all really important because I want to export that at 25 frames per second. Audio here, I'm going to come across to, and I'm going to turn off export audio because I don't want to export audio. Back to video, I just want to check the advanced settings here. Square, CinemaScope, that's all good, and yep, same as project. The data burn in same as project. That is all good. Bypass re-encode is really only if you have done some caching already and some encoding of files, and then you don't need to re-encode everything. You can pop that on and it won't re-encode every single clip. It'll use data that's already generated from the project. That looks good. The only other thing which is really important is up here, probably should have said this first, you need to render out individual clips. That's really, really important step. That is one of the most important things because otherwise it's just going to render out this whole timeline as one big piece of footage. And you won't have individual clips and they won't be named correctly and stuff like that. So that's a really, really important step. It did add a couple of items there, so I'm just going to check that those are all good. I'm not going to use a constant bitrate because I don't mind the bitrate changing because this footage isn't necessarily my highest end render or my final render. So constant bitrate, variable bitrate is fine. Yep, everything else is good to go. Cool. Now the final point, which is really, really important as well, is this file name here. You have to make sure that this is correct, and you have to have the source name. And the reason that is because each of these clips I want to match the name. It's going to be in a different folder. It's going to be in the proxy folder, but I want it to match the exact clip name of the DNG container, so that they correlate back, so that when I relink them later, link from the proxies back to the DNGs, when I bring the XML back into Davinci Resolve after editing in Premiere, and that's gonna be for another video, not for this video, but I wanna make sure that all matches up and I can easily relink it back. So the names have to be the same as the original DNG footage. That's a really important step. So that's all clipped, that's all ready, clicked and ready to go. Everything else is good to go. So I can literally now add to render queue, and I'm going to add it to render queue. It's going to ask me where I want to put it. Now I've already created a folder where I'm going to put this, and it's in Coral Shoot 2, and we're in the Springfield Rise under Proxies. So I'm going to double click on there. I'm going to throw this footage in here. So it's saying there's 52 clips that it's going to render out, and I'm going to hit start render. Now it's going to do the first clip first, and what I want to do is I want to check that that clip has actually rendered correctly. So this is a final step that I do while this render's starting. Generally I set these renders up overnight, so I'm not worried about this footage when I'm during the day waiting for it to render. I just let my computer churn through it overnight, and it's a 15-minute setup, and then it churns overnight, and then in the morning I can come in and I can edit the whole project without even having to render anything out until the end. So it works really well for me. But what I do is I just wait and I check this, because I want to make sure that this renders out correctly. Sometimes if you have the wrong frame rates, it does actually stuff up the render, the output render. So I'm just going to go back into the 8 terabyte RAID here, and my computer might be hanging a little bit here just because I've got a bunch of things going, and the screen cap as well. And I'm going to look at the Springfield proxies, and that is still churning through this first clip. So it's going to get through this first clip here completely. And it's completely through that first clip. And so all I want to do is check this clip on my computer, that it pops up there and that I can review it. And there it is. It's letting me review it. It's not playing it back smooth, but the clip is good to go, and everything is good to go. So that's just going to keep on running and churn through those overnight. It's given me a 2-hour render time, but it might speed up. It might be about an hour and 20 minutes, hour and a half, which is not bad. I can go have a nap and come back later and start editing those clips in Premiere. But that is for another video. So hopefully this has given you some insight into how I process raw CinemaDNG images from a Blackmagic URSA or from Magic Lantern. And yeah, I hope you got something out of that, you guys. Thank you so much for watching. And if you like this video, make sure you hit the thumbs up. And if you didn't like it, that's okay. Send me some comments anyway. I'll get back to you. I love to hear a little bit of feedback as well about my vids. Also, if you like my channel and like the content I'm doing, just make sure you hit the subscribe button, because I believe that there's been a lot of videos. I think I'm up to about 70 videos now, and I think I'm bringing a lot of value in this channel, and I've got some other videos planned. The next step in this video is basically then cutting the edit in Premiere Pro, which is pretty straightforward. Probably you guys know how to do that and done that before, but then also setting up to link this footage back to Davinci Resolve and do the color grading on the original DNG sequences. So that's a really cool step as well. So I think maybe if that's something that you're into and that's something you want to look at, then keep an eye out for the next video. And other than that, thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.